What if there was a podcast that did it all? Sports, politics, world events. Well, that's what we've got. You're listening to C&C Talks.
Hello, I'm Colin.
And I'm Charlie.
Welcome to episode 15 of the C&C Talks podcast.
And just as a reminder, as we do every episode, we're supposed to release on Tuesday, which we will next week when we actually get back to normal. But we're releasing on Wednesday this week. That's another reminder. We talk about politics, world events, and sports. And it's currently Tuesday, September 6th, 2022 at around, it's supposed to be 6, but it's currently 7:30 Pacific time.
Yeah, and I'm going to start with talking about something that happened last Thursday. President Biden giving a speech at Independence Hall, talk about, as he described it, the continuing battle for the soul of the nation. And I'm going to preface these comments that I'm going to give by saying that this podcast, we try to be, I don't want to say fairly neutral, because our goal is to tell you things as, like, how they happen. And right, the truth is not a neutral thing, right? For example, the facts are that one party right now in America is, frankly, a cult supporting a leader who tried to overthrow democracy, and the other party isn't. And I get it when media says they want to be neutral, but the fact is that the two parties are just not the same thing. And it's wrong to treat them as the same thing, right? The media should be pro-democracy. The role of the media is to call out problems, and ultimately, one party has a significantly bigger problem than the other. So with that being said, let's dive into this Biden speech and, frankly, the reaction to it from the Republicans, because this was a speech that called out the Republicans, specifically, as he described it, the MAGA Republicans, or the Trump wing of the party. And that's a wing of the party that is getting more and more mainstream, right? There's always been crazies, but that's crazies in the Republican Party. Fascists, frankly, have become a mainstream thing in the Republican Party. And he called it out and basically said that we need to commit to democracy again, and that these people are a threat to the country. And frankly, he's 100% right. They're still looking back on the 2020 election, saying that, oh, but there might have been fraud, and no, we don't have any evidence of it, but we think that there's fraud, and so the election should be decertified. And that's just false. And right, and anybody who's saying that Biden's speech was super divisive instead of doing what he pledged to do, which was be a unifier, and right, that's the Republicans' message about this speech, that it was a divisive speech. Right? Democracy should not be divisive. Right? In a democracy, there's plenty of room to debate policy and all of that. But the concept of democracy cannot be up for debate. And I also feel like the media has just completely flubbed their role in all of this, because their main focus was on the fact that there were two Marines behind Biden during the speech. And first of all, was it a great idea to have that? Maybe not. And was it in violation of the Hatch Act? Possibly. I don't think it's the most important thing to discuss, but if it was, right, that's wrong, and indecent or illegal behavior should be called out regardless of what party. However, first of all, where were they when Trump was doing these same things? Right? During the Republican National Convention of 2020, Trump gave his speech on the South Lawn of the White House. Right? In fact, he even had a naturalization ceremony during the Republican National Convention. He used immigrants, the same ones that, he waged an all-out war on during his presidency, basically as political props. And where was the media focus on that? And also, right, I get that you can claim it's a political speech, which, and I kind of get, but at the same time, it shouldn't be a political speech. It's only a political speech because the Republican Party has decided that the very concept of democracy is political. And right, that's what Biden's speech was all about. And the fact that he even has to give a primetime address to the nation about that sort of thing tells you where our country is right now. And so it was a very good speech, arguably not hard enough, but right, if you are saying that this was a divisive speech, then maybe you are the problem because you're saying that democracy is divisive. So, Charlie, any additional thoughts on that before we move on?
I did actually have a question for you. I know a lot of our viewers do know quite a bit about politics, but for those who don't know, what is the Hatch Act?
Yeah, so the Hatch Act is I guess a law that basically says that you can't do political speeches on federal land, pretty much. It's there's never really been any type of enforcement on it, but ideally that's the rule. And again, Trump violated this many times. Unclear whether Biden violated this. But are you ready to move on?
In a second here. I also just did want to mention if you haven't listened to the speech already, you should. It was a very good speech, and I also did want to mention. I think Colin, I think your description of it was really well done. Just the part about calling out a certain group of people was really interesting because I heard a lot of people in response to that saying that they were calling out millions of people for no reason. But I think obviously there is a reason because there was an insurrection at the U.S. Capitol.
Yeah, no, and if you're saying that Biden's speech declared war on half of America, first of all, it's not half of America. But if that's what you're saying, then you're basically saying that half of America is fascists.
Essentially.
Right? And you're in particular implying that the Republican Party is fascist.
Which are they?
That's something that I would agree with personally, that the Republican Party is fascist, but I don't think that that's the messaging that the Republican Party wants to send. Or maybe it is, because they seem to have no problem all but openly declaring themselves fascist.
Yes.
But
yes, let's move on.
Let's move on to the leader of the Republican Party, the biggest fascist, which is Trump, because he's under really, really big investigation for mishandling classified documents. But Hillary's emails is what he's focused on. But anyway, a judge has appointed a special master for the Trump case. The DOJ probably going to appeal this ruling, as there's no clear reason why there should be a special master, but some interesting circumstances, Charlie, that led to there being a special master.
And what does that special master do again?
So basically, they review to look at claims of attorney-client privilege or executive privilege. And let me just clarify all that you need to know about executive privilege. Is Trump the executive? No, he's not. Okay? So unless Biden tries to say that there's some executive privilege here, there's no executive privilege. That's the end of the discussion on that one. But basically, it's halted the DOJ's efforts to look at these documents. And really, it's a delay tactic. It won't ultimately make a difference as to whether he's indicted, I guess, but it will certainly delay the process, which is ultimately what Trump hoped for. And this judge, super pro-Trump judge, actually appointed by Trump, a member of the Federalist Society. But also we have some very, very noteworthy news out of the UK that came in just yesterday.
Yeah, and this is very personal to me as a British citizen. As you may know, from a few months ago, Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced that he would resign, and there would be a special election. So the way elections work in England is if they're leader resigns, they don't immediately have a general election. Instead, the party votes on a replacement. And the way that happened this time around is a large group, or not very large actually, well, inside the party rather large, but a rather small group of the total population chose Liz Truss as the new prime minister. So she is now the new prime minister. And in terms of politics, she supports tax cuts for the rich and is anti-union. In fact, over the course of the summer in Britain, there have been train strikes, port strikes that have really been damaging to the economy quite a bit due to the rising inflation and rising prices. In fact, energy prices and gas heating prices will triple by January due to inflation and the government not really doing anything. Meanwhile, companies such as British Petroleum, which is what they call gasoline over there, are seeing record profits. And actually, she said something along the lines, I don't know the direct quote, but she said something along the lines of, it is not correct to take money in taxes and give it back as benefits, which, in my opinion, that's the point of taxes.
Yeah.
So this is huge news. The interesting thing, though, is she is not very well supported. A lot of people are incredibly angry about what's happened, and this could actually sway the course of the next general election, which will happen in 18 months' time.
Yeah, so do you think that there's any chance that the Conservative Party actually loses the majority in that general election?
There is a possibility. I don't know too much about the current state of how mixed up Parliament is. I will need to look into that. But yes, I do think there is a high possibility that the Conservatives could lose in the upcoming election.
Yeah.
So let's get back to the U.S. now, Colin.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to another election, this one in Alaska, where Sarah Palin, the former Alaska governor and vice presidential candidate in 2008 on John McCain's ticket, she's lost her special election to replace the late Don Young, who was in Congress for about 50 years. Democrat Mary Peltola was elected to the seat, the first Alaska native in Congress, first Democrat elected to Congress in Alaska in a very long time. As we mentioned, Don Young held that seat for a while, but this is definitely a good sign for the Democrats heading into the midterms, but they're still 2 months away, which, as we all know, is a lifetime in politics.
And it is interesting to see that over the last 4 or 5 months, the Republicans went from a huge advantage, but they've just had blunder after blunder after just saying things that they shouldn't be saying, doing things they shouldn't be doing, and it's really hurt them in these election races.
Well, I think that also no small part of it's because of the overturning of Roe v. Wade, which is just so unpopular. I mean, we saw what happened to Kansas, but then also Biden's had some big successes. He passed the Inflation Reduction Act, and as you mentioned, the Republican Party has definitely screwed things up for themselves.
So really at this point, I could really see this going either way. How do you think the midterms are going to end, Colin?
Well, yeah, if they were to be held today, Democrats are keeping the House, to me at least.
The Senate as well, or
they will definitely keep the Senate. The only question is whether they'll gain seats there. I would say that as of now, if it was to be held today again, they'd probably gain one, maybe two. But again,
and where is that gain?
Well, Dr. Oz is going to lose in Pennsylvania. That's to me a no doubter. And that seat's currently held by a Republican, because Pat Toomey, he's retiring. They could also maybe pick up a seat in Wisconsin or Ohio, which is kind of crazy. That might possibly be offset by a loss in Nevada. I think that the Democrats are probably strong in Georgia and Arizona, the two other big seats that they have to hold. But again, election 2 months away, that's a lifetime in politics. So we will see what happens, and we will keep you covered of it as it gets closer.
And just a reminder, I don't think a lot of people need to hear this, but I think it should be said anyway. It is important not only for locally, but also nationally, to get out and vote. Vote for what you think is the correct course for this country. When the midterms come up, we need everyone who can to vote.
Okay, and also, if you are listening and you are of the age of me and Charlie, please don't vote because you will be arrested. And we don't want to be liable for you being arrested.
Yes.
So vote once if you're over 18 and a U.S. citizen. But if you are over 18 and a U.S. citizen, do use that vote. It's your power.
Moving away from the world of politics to the world of sports, unfortunately, Colin has had to leave, but I will continue on. Week 1 of the college football season has begun. Great excitement for the universities and colleges across the United States. One of the big important matchups in terms of ranked play was Oregon playing Georgia, and Oregon was beaten thoroughly by Georgia with a final score of 48-9-3 final score. Oregon went from being 11th to being unranked. Utah, who also lost to unranked Florida. So what does this mean for the Pac-12? Well, as far as I can see, they have not been playing very well recently. Is it just low morale? Will they bounce back? I do think they will, but it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the season plays out. It is, after all, only week 1, so there's not much we can say yet that's definitive. Playoff predictions. This is interesting. I don't really know. You can go to Twitter to find Colin's results, but I'm going to stay neutral on this one. I don't know yet. I will get back to you in a few weeks when we have a better idea of what the college football playoffs are. In other college football playoff news, however, starting in 2026, the college football playoffs will expand from 4 teams to 12. So this is a rather large expansion. It is following a trend of expansions across sports. The NFL in 2020 increased theirs, and so did the MLB. It's interesting to have more teams in the playoffs, more teams with chances. It is, however, interesting because more teams that probably shouldn't be there are there. So that does bring down the quality of play a little bit. But it is interesting to see teams that aren't usually there have a chance to gain some big upsets. And now on to some NBA news. The Cleveland Cavaliers have traded for Donovan Mitchell of the Utah Jazz. In return, the Jazz will get Colin Sexton, draft picks, and more. And with this trade, the Cavaliers have all of a sudden become a legitimate playoff contender. They have Mitchell, Jared Allen, and Evan Mobley. So let's move on now to the NFL. Russell Wilson, former Seahawks quarterback, now with the Denver Broncos, has signed a 5-year, $245 million contract, and this now makes him under the control of the Broncos for 7 years. My thoughts on this: it is interesting to see how he will pan out. We don't really know how he will fare in that offense. He does have some pretty good weapons, and we will see how far the Broncos can make it into the playoffs and possibly even win the Super Bowl with him. We will see how that ends up panning out. Now to the U.S. Open. Serena Williams, after an absolutely incredible career, has retired. She lost in the 3rd round of the U.S. Open. And in other news, there will be a first-time major winner in the men's draw, also likely in the women's draw, with the defending champion losing in the first round. This will be the 3rd straight year of first-time major winner in the men's draw at the U.S. Open. And we will end today with the Formula 1 Dutch Grand Prix. Coming back from the 2nd year after a race in 2021. Max Verstappen, of course, the hometown favorite to win the race. Got off to a good start with battling with the 2 Mercedes for a good chunk of the race, while the Ferraris kind of hung back in the middle of that battle. Interesting enough, with the late safety car, Yuki Tsunoda going out, and a engine failure from Valtteri Bottas, ended up with Mercedes blundering a strategy that allowed Verstappen to easily pass Lewis Hamilton for the race win. Hamilton on the medium tire with everyone else on the softs dropped back to 4th, with Russell ending up 2nd and Ferrari Leclerc finishing in 3rd. This weekend, will be at Ferrari's home circuit at Monza, the Temple of Speed, which will be on at 6 o'clock in the morning Pacific time on the 11th, I believe, which will be an interesting watch before a rather long gap before the race at Singapore. The interesting thing about that is there's supposed to be a race in between that, which was canceled due to the fact that it was in Sochi on the Black Sea coast in Russia, which has been canceled due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And it looks like we have finally run out of time, so I will say, please subscribe. We release episodes every single Tuesday, everywhere where you listen to your podcasts. Check out our new website, C&CTalks.net, where you can not only look at our podcasts, but also ask us questions that we can respond to. Thank you to Morris, our producer, Zack, our production designer, and Drake, our co-writer. And also follow us on Twitter. I'm Charlie, and I'll see you next week.